My mother brought my ex in my wedding to break off my engagement with my pregnant fiance. Now I had had enough. Growing up as Margaret Holloway's son, 34M, was like being caught in a perpetual storm, one where the sky was always overcast, and I was always bracing for rain. Her presence was suffocating. It hung over me like a thick, choking fog, relentless and inescapable. She wasn't the type of overbearing mother who coddled her child out of excessive love. No, my mother's control came from a place far darker. She wielded her motherhood like a sword, slicing away my independence and autonomy piece by piece. To her, I was not a person, I was a reflection. A legacy. An extension of her own identity. Meant to be shaped, polished, and displayed according to her standards. As an only child, I was the sole focus of her attention, which at first, felt like love. When I was young, I misinterpreted her suffocating presence as devotion. She dressed me in perfectly ironed outfits, braided my hair with perfect partings when I was little, and later, hand-picked my wardrobe as a teenager. I didn't notice it then, but her obsession with control wasn't about care, it was about dominance. She ensured I was always impeccably dressed, groomed, and presentable, not for my sake, but for hers. My earliest memories were filled with her voice. "George, sit up straight. You're slouching like a hooligan. George, don't play with that boy. His family is questionable. George, I'm doing this for your own good." Everything was for my own good. When I started school, she scrutinized my friendships. If she didn't approve of a classmate's parents, she found ways to keep me away from them. Invitations to birthday parties were misplaced. Playdates were cancelled. And when I asked why, she would offer cryptic, condescending answers. "You'll understand when you're older, darling," she would say with a sweet but patronizing smile. As I grew older, she became more controlling. By the time I was a teenager, she had reduced my life to a strict regimen: school, home, and the occasional family-approved activity. She demanded to know where I was at all times. She read my text messages under the guise of keeping me safe and dictated my future like she was reading from a script. I was to attend the best schools. I was to pursue a prestigious career. I was to marry a woman of her choosing, one from a family she deemed suitable, and I had no say in the matter. It wasn't until I was 17 that I found the courage to push back. Her obsession with my academic perfection was relentless. She demanded top grades and nothing less. I spent nights hunched over my desk, my fingers cramping from the endless writing, but it was never good enough. If I brought home an A- instead of an A+, she would smile tightly, her lips pressed into a thin line, and say, "Next time, you'll do better, won't you?" It was never a question. It was a command. But then, I met Lauren. Lauren was the antithesis of everything my mother wanted for me. She was wild, free-spirited, and spontaneous. She had a laugh that made my chest ache and a smile that could outshine the sun. Lauren wasn't from a wealthy family. She didn't come from the social circles my mother approved of. She was just a regular girl, funny, kind, and full of life. We met in high school during our final year. She was in my literature class, and we ended up paired together for a project. At first, I was hesitant. I had been trained to keep my distance from people like her, carefree, independent, and, according to my mother, beneath me, but Lauren didn't care about social status. She didn't care that my family name carried weight. She cared about me. She saw through the polished veneer my mother had crafted and found the real George beneath. With her, I felt free for the first time. We would sneak off after school, driving aimlessly with her hand in mine. She made me feel alive. I was young, reckless, and hopelessly in love, but my mother saw Lauren as a stain on the perfect image she had created. She called her unsuitable, low class, and a distraction. She didn't hide her disdain. Instead, she launched a quiet but ruthless campaign to break us apart. It started subtly at first. Lauren would leave me notes in my locker, sweet, handwritten letters that smelled faintly of her perfume. But more than once, I noticed them missing. I later found out that my mother had been bribing a school janitor to search my locker and remove them. Then came the phone calls. Lauren's parents started receiving anonymous calls, cruel, venomous lies. They were told that Lauren was a troublemaker, that she was dragging me down. My mother fed them insidious gossip, and the seed of doubt was planted. When Lauren's parents grew wary of our relationship, it created a rift between us. She became distant, confused, and hurt. I could see the pain in her eyes when she accused me of hiding things from her. And she wasn't wrong. I was hiding the fact that my mother was the one pulling the strings. Eventually, my mother played her trump card. One night, I came home to find her waiting for me in the sitting room. She was calm, too calm. With a voice devoid of emotion, she presented me with a stack of printouts. It was Lauren's family financial records, dug up by a private investigator. She laid them out before me like evidence in a courtroom. "You see, George," she said softly. "They're in debt. Lauren's family will use you. She will use you. You'll be ruined." I was furious, but she had already dug her claws too deep into Lauren's life. The tension grew unbearable. We fought. The joy that once filled our relationship was strangled by my mother's influence. Eventually, it ended. When she walked away, her eyes filled with unshed tears. My mother was there. She held me in her arms like a vulture claiming her prize, stroking my hair with false comfort. "See," she whispered. "I was right all along. After Lauren, I gave in. I was drained. Tired of fighting. My mother had won. I let her pick my college, dictate my degree, and micromanage my future. I studied business, just as she wanted. I attended her charity galas, shook hands with the people she approved of, and dated the women she considered suitable. But inside, I was empty. No matter how many women she paraded before me, I never felt anything real. No spark, no connection. I went through the motions because it was easier than resisting. By my late 20s, I had resigned myself to the life she had designed for me. I was her perfect son, the hollow, compliant puppet she had always wanted. And then, everything changed when I met Isabel. Isabel came into my life like a fresh gust of wind. We met at a friend's birthday party, one of the few events my mother hadn't orchestrated. She was beautiful, yes, but it was her spirit that drew me in. She was witty, opinionated, and refreshingly real. Unlike the polished women my mother forced on me, Isabel had no interest in impressing anyone. She was unapologetically herself, and it captivated me. Our connection was instant and electric. When I was with her, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: free. She didn't care about my family's name or wealth. She cared about me. When she became pregnant, I was overjoyed. For the first time, I felt a future that belonged to me, not one dictated by my mother. I proposed to Isabel, and she said yes with happy tears in her eyes, but the moment I shared the news with my mother, I saw the familiar coldness return to her eyes. She smiled stiffly, but I knew her better than that. She was planning something. I had no idea just how far she was willing to go. I should have known better. The morning of my wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. It was meant to mark the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where I was finally free from my mother's grasp. But of course, she couldn't let that happen. I woke up with a lightness in my chest, an unfamiliar sensation after years of living under my mother's thumb. The early morning sun spilled through the large windows of the guest house where I was staying with my groomsmen. The golden rays painted the wooden floor in soft patterns, and for the first time in years, I felt at peace. I turned onto my side, gazing out at the garden through the window. From where I lay, I could see the rows of white chairs already arranged on the manicured lawn. The floral arch was draped with white roses, Isabel's favorite, and delicate ribbons fluttered softly in the breeze. It was perfect. She was going to love it. Eric, my best man and childhood friend, walked into the room holding 2 cups of coffee. His dark brown hair was a mess, and he wore a lopsided grin. "Morning, almost married man," he greeted, handing me a cup. "Morning," I replied, taking a sip. The warmth of the coffee steadied my nerves. You nervous? He asked, plopping down on the edge of the bed. No, I said without hesitation. Just excited. And I was. For once, I wasn't thinking about my mother. I wasn't worried about her disapproval or her mind games. Today was about Isabel and me. No one else. Or so I thought. After I showered and dressed, the hours passed in a pleasant haze. Guests began to arrive, filling the garden with soft laughter and conversation. The string quartet began to play, and my heart raced with anticipation. I stood by the arched trellis with Eric at my side, waiting for my bride. Then, she appeared. Isabel walked down the aisle in an ivory gown that clung gracefully to her form. Her golden hair was pinned back in a delicate braid, adorned with tiny pearls. Her eyes, shimmering with love and happiness, locked onto mine. The sunlight made her look ethereal, and for a moment, the world fell away. Everything was perfect. But then, my mother walked in. At first, I barely noticed her. She was seated near the back in the section reserved for family. She wore a navy blue gown, the color she always chose for herself at events, a subtle reminder that she was the authority figure. Her lips curved into a tight, artificial smile, but her eyes glinted with something far more sinister. The ceremony proceeded. I slipped the ring onto Isabel's finger, my hand steady and sure. When she did the same, I felt tears sting my eyes. We kissed as the officiant declared us husband and wife, and the crowd burst into cheers, but just as we were walking back down the aisle, hand in hand, ready to celebrate, I caught a glimpse of her, Lauren, my ex-girlfriend. The woman I hadn't seen in over 3 years. She was standing awkwardly at the edge of the crowd, dressed in an elegant, pale pink silk gown, far too formal for a mere guest. She clutched a small clutch in trembling hands, her eyes wide with nervousness. She was beautiful, as she had always been, but seeing her there felt like a slap across the face. I froze mid-step. The blood drained from my face. My grip on Isabel's hand momentarily loosened. What the hell was she doing here? Lauren's eyes locked onto mine, and she offered me a small, apologetic smile. I felt my stomach churn. My heart pounded in my chest, confusion swirling into rage. I whipped my head around to find my mother sitting calmly at her table. A satisfied smirk barely concealed behind her wine glass. That's when I knew, she had invited Lauren. The reception was meant to be a joyful affair, a celebration of love and new beginnings. Instead, it turned into a tightrope walk of tension and suppressed fury. While the guests mingled and drank champagne, I confronted my mother. I stormed over to her table, my fists clenched at my sides. My voice was low and sharp. What the hell did you do? I hissed through gritted teeth. She glanced at me, feigning innocence. What on earth are you talking about, darling? I leaned in closer, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. Lauren. Why is she here? Her lips curled into a cruel smile. Oh, that. Well, I simply thought it was only right for you to see her again, before you made such a terrible mistake. I stared at her in disbelief. Are you insane? I spat. You brought my ex to my wedding. The woman you manipulated out of my life. Are you that desperate to destroy me? She placed her wine glass down with delicate precision and fixed me with a condescending gaze. Her voice was sickeningly sweet. I only did what was necessary, George. You're blinded by infatuation with that woman, she sneered, gesturing vaguely toward Isabel, who was across the garden laughing with her friends. But you could have been with Lauren. She was the right choice for you. You still have feelings for her, don't you? The audacity of her words made my vision blur with fury. I gripped the edge of the table so hard my knuckles turned white. Get out, I said in a low, dangerous voice. Her eyes widened slightly. Excuse me. I straightened, towering over her. My voice was louder this time, more venomous. Get out. You are not welcome here. Her mouth opened and closed like a gasping fish. She stared at me in disbelief. The crowd had started to take notice, and a few heads turned in our direction. But I didn't care. You've controlled me my whole life. I seethed. But this is over. You ruined my relationship with Lauren. You manipulated and destroyed everything I cared about. But you will not ruin my marriage. You will not ruin my life. She scowled, her lips twisting into a bitter sneer. For the first time in my life, I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, fear. Without another word, she stood, grabbed her clutch, and stalked out of the reception. Guests murmured quietly, exchanging puzzled glances, but I ignored them. My eyes were on Isabel, the woman I had just married, the woman my mother had tried to humiliate. I walked over to her, gently cupping her face. "I love you," I whispered. Her brows furrowed slightly. "George. Is everything okay?" I kissed her softly, holding her close. "Everything is perfect," I lied. But inside, I was seething. The morning after the wedding, I woke up with a sense of finality. Isabel was still asleep, her breathing soft and even. The morning light painted her face in golden hues, making her look even more beautiful. I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek and kissed her forehead. Then, I got out of bed and made the call I had been rehearsing in my head all night. "Hello, Mark. It's George Holloway. I need you to draw up some papers immediately." My lawyer's voice perked up, suddenly alert. "What kind of papers?" "Power of attorney. My mother's access to my finances, estate, and business interests cut her off completely. I want nothing in her name. I want every connection severed." He was silent for a moment, then he said, "Are you sure about this, George? This is permanent." "I've never been more sure of anything," I replied coldly. Within hours, the documents were prepared. That afternoon, I went to my mother's house. She was sitting in her sunroom, pretending to be unbothered. I handed her the thick envelope without a word. She opened it and scanned the documents. Her eyes narrowed in disbelief. "George," she whispered. "What is this?" I met her gaze with ice in my eyes. "It's your eviction from my life," I said coldly. Her lips quivered. She reached for me, but I stepped back. "You're done." "I'm done." Her face paled. She started to stammer. "George, you can't mean this. I'm your mother. I raised you, you controlled me," I snapped. "You ruined my relationships, drove people out of my life, and tried to sabotage the best thing that ever happened to me. You brought my ex to my wedding like it was some kind of soap opera stunt. Do you even realize how disgusting that was?" Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt nothing. "You'll regret this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No," I said with finality. "The only thing I regret is letting you hold power over me for so long." The aftermath of my mother's betrayal left a void in my life, one filled with anger, exhaustion, and an overwhelming sense of relief. Cutting her off had been a long overdue necessity, but it didn't mean it was easy. It was like amputating a diseased limb, painful, but necessary to survive. The days following my wedding were a blur. While Isabel and I should have been basking in the joy of our new life together, I found myself untangling the web of control my mother had woven around me for years. It was exhausting. But for the first time in my life, I was free. My mother didn't take her exile quietly. 3 days after the wedding, I received a call from an unknown number. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether to answer. Against my better judgment, I did. I barely had time to say hello before my mother's voice sliced through the silence like a blade. "George, you've humiliated me. No greeting. No pretense. Just pure, unfiltered rage. I gave you everything," she seethed. "And this is how you repay me? You embarrassed me in front of our family, in front of everyone. Do you have any idea how that made me look?" I clenched my jaw, gripping the edge of my desk to steady myself. You made a scene at my wedding, I reminded her. You brought Lauren there to humiliate my wife. You did this to yourself. She let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and cold. Oh, please. I was trying to help you. I was trying to stop you from making a mistake. And what did you do? You threw me away like garbage. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to remain calm. No, Mother. I finally put you in your place. A sharp intake of breath. Then, venom. She's going to ruin you, George. Just like I said she would. And when she does, don't come crawling back to me. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I simply said, goodbye, Mother. And I hung up. That was the last time I ever spoke to Margaret Holloway. Of course, cutting my mother off wasn't just about ignoring her calls. It was about undoing the damage she had done over decades. She had embedded herself into every aspect of my life. She had ties to my business, to my finances, even to some of my closest friends. Severing her influence was like carefully extracting barbed wire from my skin, painful and slow, but absolutely necessary. I worked with my lawyers to ensure she had zero control over my assets. She had always assumed she would have a say in my financial affairs, but I made sure she was legally locked out of everything. Then, there were the people. Some of my so-called friends didn't take kindly to my decision. They called me ungrateful, irresponsible, even cruel. These were the same people who had benefited from my mother's wealth and influence, the ones who had always whispered in her ear and sided with her. You're making a mistake, George, one of them, Daniel, told me over lunch. You're burning bridges you might need someday. I stirred my coffee slowly, staring at him with tired eyes. If keeping those bridges means letting my mother control my life, then let them burn. Daniel sighed, shaking his head. You've changed, man. No, I corrected. I've grown. By the end of the week, I had cut off everyone who had sided with my mother. The guest list to my life had become considerably smaller, but I didn't mind. For the first time, I was surrounded by real people. Amidst the chaos, Isabel was my anchor. She didn't push me to talk when I wasn't ready, didn't try to offer empty reassurances. She simply was there. That was all I needed. One evening, about a week after the wedding, we sat on the balcony of our apartment, the city lights flickering like distant stars. She nestled against me, her hand resting gently on my chest. Do you regret it? She asked softly. I turned to look at her, taking in the warmth in her hazel eyes, the way her hair glowed under the soft golden light. Not for a second. She exhaled a quiet breath, as if she had been holding it in. I was worried, she admitted. I know how much she controlled you. I was scared that, deep down, you'd miss her. Or that you'd change your mind. I took her hand in mine, pressing a kiss to her fingers. Isabel, you saved me, I whispered. You gave me something real, something she could never take away. She smiled then, small and relieved. We have a baby on the way, she murmured. We're going to be a family, George. Our family. One without manipulation, without control. I swallowed past the lump in my throat, nodding. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just living for someone else's expectations, I was living for us. Months passed. My mother's presence in my life faded like an old scar, still there, but no longer painful. But one day, a letter arrived. It was from her. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it. The handwriting was perfect, deliberate, as it had always been. George, you have embarrassed and disappointed me beyond words. I gave you everything. And you threw it all away for that woman. You have abandoned your family, your legacy, and everything I worked for. You are no longer my son. I will not contact you again. Do not contact me. No love. No warmth. Just finality. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer of my desk. Then I went to Isabel, where she was sitting in the nursery, arranging tiny baby clothes into drawers. She looked up when she saw my face. "What is it?" I smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Nothing at all," I said, and for the first time, I felt truly free.